Tottenham have had a few managers recently, and yeah. So, here's the question. Would a random wheel actually do a better job? Because right now, at the time of recording, Tottenham Hotspur are sitting 18th with a very real chance of relegation. So, we're going to find out together. Every single game, a wheel will decide how Tottenham play, the tactic, formation, and the mentality. I don't make the decisions, the wheel does. I'm just here to carry them out. The assistant picks the team, sets the opposition instructions, and runs the match. But because the assistant can't actually make substitutions, I'm only allowed to step in if the players are injured or completely exhausted. Tottenham are banned from making any transfers all season, so whatever happens here, we're stuck with. Let's see how this turns out. Right, so if the wheel is going to be the manager, it's only right that he gets to pick his own assistant. I have taken a list of the 15 best assistant managers according to a list published by Passion for FM. So, the Wheels assistant manager for this experiment will be Francesco Mauri. So, let me go and add him to this Spurs team and we'll get right into the action. Just a quick mention that the assistant will be able to pick players from either the first team, the under-21s and the under-18s for his matchday squads. All right, game one, PSG. Let's see how they're going to play. We are going to use a park the bus tactic in a 4-3-2-1 DM narrow with a defensive mentality. Let me go set that up and I'll see you at the game. Right, well, this is our new management team's first lineup. And you can see here just how it fits into the new system. And it almost looked like it could work, as just 13 minutes in, Xavi Simons smashed the ball against the bar. But hope was soon dashed, as João Neves did manage to break the deadlock not long afterwards. So half-time, 1-0, and Spurs not really in the game other than their one chance. At the 66th, Paris did manage to double their lead through Ballon d'Or winner Ousmane Dembélé. And he added a second for himself and a third for Paris near the end of the game. Dembélé did complete his hat-trick with a penalty later in the game, and maybe Paris was just too much for the wheel to handle in his first game. So Paris did end up winning the Super Cup, but never mind, we have a long season to go and a lot for manager Wheel to prove. Alright, Burnley time. How are we playing? We're going to go with the direct counter-attack in a 4-2-4. And we will be playing very attacking. Interesting. The wheel's gone for a very attacking direct counter system, which to me didn't really make much sense. But it didn't matter. Goals from Richarlison, Paulinho, Kudus, Kolo Muani, and even an own goal from Danso saw Tottenham go to a 4-1 victory and storm to their first 3 points of the season. Bigger test in Man City, and we will be playing Route 1. 4-2-2-2 AM narrow in a defensive formation. See you there. In a defensive Brexit-style performance, it looked like Man City were actually frustrated into having fewer chances than they're used to. Goals from Richarlison and Rodri played out a 1-1 draw, and any manager would be happy taking a point home from the Etihad. No time to lose. Game 4, we're playing a Gegenpress in 5-1-2-2 DM with wingbacks, and mentality-wise, very attacking. Very interesting for a Bournemouth game. A very attacking Gegenpress with 5 at the back, which again, doesn't really make much sense. But with defensive solidarity, rapid wingbacks, and a real smash-and-grab approach, 2 for Richarlison and 1 each for Paulinho and Kolo Muani, saw Tottenham grab a big win, limiting Bournemouth to just 1 shot on target. Alright, going well. Game 5, we will be playing Gegenpress again. Same formation? Nope, a 4-3-3, and we will be defensive about it. Strange one. An attacking tactic with a positive shape but a defensive mentality. And that mismatch really took the venom out of Spurs' attack. Goals from Bowen and Castellanos saw Tottenham Hotspur fall to their first league defeat of the season. All right, bad loss in the league there, but straight into the Champions League, and we'll be playing very attacking, direct counter-attack, and a 4-2-3-1 DM wide. Let's see how that goes. 2 offside goals denied Spurs. With a perfect offside trap and a keeper possessed, he somehow pulled off a 9.8 rating, the highest I've ever seen a keeper get in this game. This one could have ended in double figures, but somehow a 0-0 draw. All right, Champions League up and running. Back to the Prem, where we'll play a Park the Bus against Brighton in a 3-2-4-1, and we will play Park the Bus in a cautious mentality. Let's get it. With a mismatched formation, Spurs actually gave themselves some hope by scoring early. But after that, they basically had no chances at all. In the end, they were lucky to only concede 2 goals. It's a 2-1 loss, and they're second in a row in the league. Alright, Carabao Cup, first chance at some real silverware, and we will be playing against Brentford in a Catenaccio, if I'm pronouncing that right, with 4-2-2-2 attacking midfield and narrow, and we will be cautious about it. Let's go get it set up. Goals from Thiago and Xavi Simons sent this one to penalties, and then it didn't work out. Kudus missed his spot kick, Brentford scored all 5, knocking Spurs out of the Carabao Cup and making it 4 games without a win. Game 9, needing a win. This is how we're going to try and get it. We're going to play a direct counter-attack against possibly the worst team in the league in a 5-1-2-2, and we're going to play very attacking. Okie dokie. Back to winning ways in the Premier League, with goals from Spence, Kolomuani, Richarlison, Solanke and Bentancur. We saw Spurs storm to a 6-1 win and maybe finally get some of that confidence back. Right, let's hope that big win spurs them on here. We're going to play Route 1 in the 3-4-3, and we're going to be defensive against Bayern. Let's see how that goes. Champions League, Bayern Munich. A closer game than expected. Kane coming back to haunt a defensive Spurs. They went Route 1, 3-4-3, defensive, but the Bayern attack was just too strong, and it finished 2-1. After 10 games, Spurs sit 6th in the Premier League table with 10 points, 25th in the Champions League league phase after just 2 games, and are already out of the Carabao Cup. To compare that to the real world, after 6 Premier League games, Spurs sat 4th with 11 points, meaning the wheel is currently just 1 point behind. Alrighty, work to do, but back on it. Game 11, fluid counter-attack. 4-2-3-1, and we'll be playing balanced. A relatively normal setup for once, and Spurs actually looked in control of the game. Just for 1 goal from Richarlison, but it was enough to secure all 3 points. Villa next, and we are playing control possession. 5-2-1-2. Alright. And very defensive. See how that goes. The wheel must be onto something here. In a very defensive setup, Kolomuani grabbed the only goal of the game, and with the defence looking near perfect, Spurs grind out another 1-0 win. Alright, Champions League, wanting more than a draw, playing a fluid counter-attack in 4-2-2-2, and we'll be playing cautiously, not going after a win then. Trying to counter-attack maybe the most defensive side in the competition was never going to end well. Spurs nearly held on for a ball draw, but a last-minute penalty sank them right at the end. Still no luck in the Champions League, but Everton next. We are parking the bus. We're playing a 3-2-4-1. Park the bus with a 3 back. Okay. And we will be balanced. Let's see how they get on. The Wheels lost its mind here, and it showed. Spurs fell to a 1-0 defeat, managing just a single shot on target. 2 losses in a row. Alright, last one didn't go well. Chelsea next, playing another fluid counter-attack in a 4-3-3, and will be very attacking but countering. A very attacking fluid counter setup, which somehow led to a really boring game. But right at the death, Udogie smashed one home, giving Spurs all 3 points against their bitter rivals. Right, a decent chance for some Champions League points. I'm going fluid counter-attack again. The Wheel loves it. 5-1-2-2 and playing positive. A decent chance indeed. Spurs really seem to be enjoying this fluid counter-attack system after beating Chelsea with it. The confidence was clearly there. Bergvall opened the scoring, Danso added another from a corner before Solanke wrapped things up, as Spurs romped to their first Champions League win of the campaign. Alright, finally some Champions League points, but United next. We're playing Route 1, we're playing 5-2-1-2, and we're playing cautious Brexit football, but without the 4-4-2. Using this old school Route 1 setup, Spurs absolutely shocked Manchester United. Simmons, Richarlison, 2 from Solanke, Paulinho, Udogie, Sarr, plus an own goal from De Ligt, mixed with an absolute shocker from Lamens, saw Spurs demolish United 8-0 in a win for the history books. Alright, Man U dismantled, Arsenal next, playing tiki-taka in a 4-2-2-2, and we're going to be very attacking. Interesting for a London derby. Very attacking formation, but somehow it led to a really dull game. 2 second-half goals put Spurs down, and for a very attacking side, they just never really attacked. Let's just move on. Potentially winnable Champions League game, but we're going to play control possession. We are going to be in a 4-2-2-2 again, and we're going to play attacking. Let's see. Spurs dominated the first half here, having everything except the goal. But they must have changed their shooting boots at the break, because by the 48th minute, it was already 2-0. Goals from Richarlison, Spence and Bergvall gave Spurs a 3-0 win and 3 valuable Champions League points. Alright, big win for them there, but now Fulham. Control possession again. They like that. 4-2-2-2 again. It's starting to not be so random. But this time defensive. Let's see how that goes. This one might just prove just how much difference the mentality makes. From a 3-0 win to a 2-1 defeat. Spurs controlled most of the game, but without the attacking intent, Fulham took the chances presented to them and walked away with the win. After 20 games total, Spurs sit 6th in the Premier League with 22 points. And in the Champions League phase, they currently sit 17th in the knockout playoff places. The FA Cup hasn't started for Spurs yet, but compared to the real world, at this stage, Spurs sat 12th with 18 points, meaning the Wheel is currently doing 4 points and 6 places better. Alright, update done, back to the games. Newcastle, Route 1. 5-2-1-2, and a defensive. Okie dokie. Could we be seeing the start of another Tottenham collapse? A struggling Newcastle side got past Spurs with relative ease, winning 2-0 and controlling most of the game in the process. Right, Brentford, we need to bounce back really. We're going to play wing play. We're going to use a 4-3-2-1 and it's going to be defensive again. Alright. Just for 1 goal from Richarlison, but with the defensive mentality doing its job, it was enough for another Spurs win and another 3 points for manager Wheel. Not quite Brentford, Barcelona next. We got Route 1 again. Didn't go too well last time. We got 5-2-1-2. I think that was the same. Are we going to get defensive? Very defensive. Very close to the Newcastle game. London in the snow. And Tottenham's very defensive setup almost did the job. until the 81st minute, where Barcelona scored for a lucky deflection. 1-0 loss, and it's back to the league. Alright, not too great in the Champions League, but Catenaccio 3-2-4-1, and a defensive setup for Nottingham Forest. A defensive back three is usually never a good idea, and honestly, the point was proven here. If it wasn't for Vicario making 8 saves, this one could have been much worse. Just a 1-0 loss, and we move on. And not the game you want to see when you're in bad form, but Liverpool next. Gegenpress. Haven't seen that in a while. 5-2-1-2, and cautious. Might not be too bad. After 2 games without scoring, Spurs finally found the net here, but it wasn't enough, as Liverpool scored twice. The scoreline doesn't tell the whole story, and watching this game and checking the stats, I honestly don't think either team deserved to win this one. Alright, 3 losses in a row. They're going to want to win here. We're going to play Gegenpress again. We're going to play a 4-3-3 and come on attack in. They're going to be positive. Could be a win. On another day, Spurs probably could have won this one, but Vicario dropped an absolute stinker. With Palace scoring 5 goals from just 1.99 XG, Spurs simply couldn't score enough at the other end. The game finished 5-2, and it's now 4 straight defeats for Spurs. Alright, another disappointment. Brentford next. Is wing play the one that's going to end this mid-season slump in a 4-2-4 and very defensive? Probably not. Another 1-0 loss keeps the streak going for Spurs, but this time the defence actually played quite well. The attack, on the other hand, failed to register a single shot on target as it goes from bad to worse. Right, Sunderland next. Can they stop this free fall with a Catenaccio in a 3-4-3, and they're going to play balanced, maybe? It looked like it was going to be another one of those bad days for Spurs when they went 1-0 down to a penalty in the first half. But in the second, they brought it back. Goals from Richarlison and Paulinho ended up giving them a much needed win, 2-1 to Spurs over Sunderland. Alright, much needed 3 points there. Bournemouth next. We are parking the bus. We're going to play a 5-1-2-2, not too bad, and balanced. Could get something out of this. After finally grabbing a win last time out, Spurs suddenly look to have found a bit of form again. Goals from Richarlison and Solanke secure a 2-0 win over Bournemouth, whilst the defensive tactic holds firm for a clean sheet, and another huge 3 points. Finally entering the FA Cup against Millwall, we're going to play tiki-taka. We're going to be in a 3-4-3, and we're going to play very attacking. Spurs finally enter the FA Cup, and on paper, this is a game they really should be winning. But that wouldn't be very Spursy now, would it? Millwall actually had the better chances in the first half, and despite Spurs hitting the bar twice after the break, this one goes all the way to extra time. Then, in pure Spurs fashion, Romero puts the ball into his own net to give Millwall the lead, before Watson scores from range to make it 2. Spurs crash out of the FA Cup at the first hurdle, and honestly, did we expect anything less? As we just saw, the FA Cup didn't exactly go to plan, with Spurs crashing out in the 3rd round. The Champions League, however, will make a return soon, as Spurs currently sit just inside the qualification places on goal difference alone. And in the league, Spurs currently sit 8th with 31 points after 21 games, compared to the 14th and 27 points in real life at this stage of the season. So far, 6 places and 4 points separate the wheel from a real thing going into the business end of the season. Right, put that one down to a character building experience and move on. West Ham playing fluid counter-attack in a 4-3-3, and we'll play positive, a relatively normal one. Spurs seem to have put the disappointment of the FA Cup behind them, turning their focus straight back to the league with a dismantling of West Ham. 2 goals from Kolo Muani and 1 from Bentancur give Spurs their 3rd league win in a row. Back in the Champions League, and some points needed. Wing play. They like that. 4-4-2 and very attacking. They are going to be going for the points. In pretty much a must-win Champions League game, the wheel has chosen a wing play system in a formation without any wingers. But maybe the wheel knows something I don't, and somehow Spurs still managed to score 2 and earn themselves a draw here. Alright, looking for more points. I'm going to play a direct counter-attack in a 5-1-2-2, that works, with attacking mentality. Okie dokie. This one looked like it was heading for a pretty boring draw, until the 71st minute. Burnley found a breakthrough and Porro got himself sent off shortly after, ending any chance of Spurs getting a result from this one. Alright, basically needing something here, and we're going to use Route 1, Brexit football, in a 4-2-4, almost a 4-4-2, and we're going to go attacking. Alright. Spurs needed a win here or results elsewhere to go their way to keep their Champions League hopes alive, but in the end, they took it into their own hands. Goals from Richarlison and Solanke clutch a narrow 2-1 win, and Spurs will be heading through to the playoff round. Not an easy one here. How's the Will going to play it? We're going to play direct counter-attack. Good choice. Going to play a 4-4-2. And we're going to be positive. Interesting. A game Spurs probably should have been losing here, but defensively they actually held up really well against a dominant City side. Nothing much to see here, honestly. A big point for Spurs, but at 0-0, we just move on. Second Manchester club in a row. Last time it was 8-0, I remember. Gegenpress. 3-4-3. And attacking. Could another big game be on the cards? The reverse fixture produced an incredible 8-0 win for Spurs, but this time around things were a lot more even. Kolo Muani did score from a penalty spot to keep Spurs in it, but in the end, a Bruno Fernandes goal edged this one in United's favour. Alright, consistency hard to come by these days, but we're going to play a direct counter-attack in a 3-2-4-1, and we're going to be positive. It seems manager Wheel just can't quite figure Newcastle out. 2 first-half goals from Tonali and Voltemada, and then complete control of the game from there. Newcastle beat Spurs for the second time this season. Local rivalry in Europe coming up. We got Route 1. They don't do too well on that one, do they? In a 3-2-4-1 and balance. Oh, positive. Just clicked over. A London rivalry in Europe, and this one absolutely played out like it. Simmons opened the scoring early before Chelsea hit the post just moments later. You could feel that not just the result, but bragging rights mattered here. João Pedro pulled one back just before half-time, and both teams were clearly going for the win. But late in the second half, Spurs finally made their chances count, with Paulinho and former Chelsea man Conor Gallagher scoring. Spurs will be taking a deserved 3-1 lead to Stamford Bridge. Good win for them there. Arsenal next. We got control possession. We're going to do a 4-3-3, and we'll be playing defensively. All right. Another London derby, but this one went very differently. Arsenal controlled the game from start to finish, but Spurs' defence somehow kept holding firm until almost the very last minute, when a Vicario mistake gifted Arsenal the winner. London is red. Still not leaving London. Chelsea second leg, 3-1 aggregate, tiki-taka. We got 5-1-2-2 and very attacking. Not wanting to simply defend the lead, the wheel actually decided to go very attacking for the second leg, and somehow it paid off perfectly. Solanke extended the aggregate lead in the first half, and with the game ending 1-0 on the night, Spurs are comfortably through to the next round. Having a very London-heavy February, and this time playing a direct counter-attack in a 4-2-2-2, and will be balanced. Spurs definitely worked the hardest of the two teams here, but they just couldn't create any real chances of substance. Then, against the run of play, Munoz gave the opposition the lead, and it ends as a 1-0 loss for Spurs today. After the 40th game in this experiment, Spurs are through to the Champions League round of 16, but in the Premier League, things aren't exactly looking great. Spurs currently sit 13th with 35 points, which somehow still leaves them 3 places and 6 points better off than they were at this stage in real life. Okay, updated and moving on. We're playing very defensive. I did this in a different order, but we're playing vertical tiki-taka and we'll be in a 4-2-4. Supposedly in a very defensive setup, Spurs came flying out the blocks, scoring twice in the opening 2 minutes, and for the other 88, Palace had absolutely no answer. Spurs lead with all 3 points. You know, I don't think I've had one save in the Champions League on this year's FM without facing Inter, and here we are again, with a vertical tiki-taka in a 4-2-2-2, very vertical, good for them. And we're going to be balanced. All right. Spurs somehow made it all the way to the Champions League round of 16, with Inter Milan waiting for them here. But honestly, both teams looked pretty nervous from the start. Inter had the better of the chances overall, but the two sides play out a tense 0-0 draw, and it's all to play for in Milan. Right, Liverpool, not what you want to see between two Champions League games, but we'll play Gegenpress. We'll play a 4-2-3-1, very meta. And we'll play positive. Honestly, how I would set up. Up until the half-hour mark, this actually looked like a pretty even game. Then everything completely fell apart. Liverpool scored once in the 30th, and then added a second, a third, and a fourth within minutes of each other. Kolo Muani did score before the break, and added another in the second half to briefly give Spurs some hope, but Liverpool eventually added a fifth, and then a sixth late on. A brutal 6-2 defeat for Spurs, and one they will need to quickly forget. Well, hopefully that doesn't affect them too much. Inter again now. We're playing fluid counter-attack. We're going to be in a 4-3-2-1. And we're going to play positive. Same formation. Against the exact same formation Liverpool just scored 6 past, it only took Inter 4 minutes to score themselves. Then just 1 minute into the second half, they had another. Simmons did manage to pull one back with 15 minutes left, giving Spurs a tiny bit of hope, but Inter immediately killed the comeback. And then adding another minutes later, Bergville grabbed one late on, but it was purely a consolation with Inter quickly adding a fifth. Spurs are out of Europe and can only now focus on getting the best possible league position. Right, after the worst week imaginable, let's finish this strong, using fluid counter-attack, playing in a 5-2-1-2, and having a positive outlook. Spurs really need a late surge up the table now, and an early goal from Ben Davies immediately signalled their intent. Forest did put Spurs under plenty of pressure afterwards, but they defended well and held on for a narrow win. Right, not a bad beginning to the end. Sunderland next, playing Catenaccio, if I'm saying that right still. 5-1-2-2, and we'll play defensive. Makes sense. With a slim chance of European football still remaining, Spurs really need to keep winning here. But despite Spurs defending solidly and Sunderland dominating most of the ball, neither side really did enough to find a breakthrough, and both teams settle for a point in a pretty boring game. Okay, 4 points from a home stretch so far. Brighton next, and we're playing Route 1. Hasn't gone well for them before. We're playing a 4-3-3, and we're going to be attacking. Okay. Going from defensive away to attacking at home. Spurs actually defended really well here and left it late to finally break through with Kulusevski scoring the winner. They hold on for a 1-0 win and keep their hopes of European football alive. Going relatively well. Wolves next. We're going to play a vertical tiki-taka. We're going to be in a 4-2-4, and we're going to play cautiously. Honestly, any tactic should probably work against this Wolves side, but this one took a while to get going, until Spurs won a penalty just after half-time, which Kolo Muani converted. Udogie doubled the lead soon after, a 2-0 win, another 3 points, and somehow 4 straight games without conceding. Going very well for them right now, but Villa next. We know they can be difficult. Going to play a Catenaccio. We're going to play a 3-4-3, and we're going to be very attacking. Okay. Can Spurs keep another clean sheet here? The answer is no. After 450 minutes without conceding, Watkins finally finds a way through and Spurs are resigned to a 1-0 defeat. Alright, bad loss, but Leeds next. Let's go with a vertical tiki-taka and a 4-2-3-1. And playing very attacking, very close to very defensive. After a dent in their European hopes last time out, Spurs were looking to bounce straight back here, and a first half goal from Kolo Muani gave them a perfect start. They then grabbed a second right at the end, limited Leeds to very few chances, and walked away with another important win. Gave a penultimate game, and we're going to play a vertical tiki-taka. We're going to be in a 4-3-3, and we're going to play very attacking. Say what you like about the wheel, but he definitely seems to have Chelsea's number. A very early goal set the tone here, and Chelsea just never really had an answer for the rest of the game. Another 1-0 win for Spurs to go alongside the Champions League victory earlier in the season. Here we go, last game, and we're going to play a gegenpress. We're going to be in a 3-2-4-1, and we're going to play cautiously. Spurs needed help elsewhere to still have a chance of European football, but first they had to help themselves. Everton took the lead in the first half and Spurs needed a response. They tried everything they could, but just couldn't find a way through. It ended 1-0, and any remaining hope of Europe leaves with Everton. Alright, that's it. Every game is finished, every competition over, so let's go and take a quick look at how it compared to how Spurs did in real life. Let's do this in order, starting with the Super Cup. In-game, Spurs were hammered 4-0, while in real life they actually managed to take it to penalties after a 2-2 draw, but eventually losing the shootout. Carabao Cup next. The Wheels Spurs went out on penalties to Brentford in the third round, while real-life Spurs made it one round further before losing to Newcastle in the fourth. FA Cup, and one to forget for virtual Spurs, the wheel crashed out in the third round to Millwall, although in real life Spurs also went out in the third round, losing to Aston Villa. And the big boy Champions League, this is where the wheel Spurs actually did pretty well. They made it all the way to the round of 16 before eventually losing 5-2 to Inter, which is weirdly similar to real life, because real Spurs also reached a round of 16 and also lost 5-2, just to Atletico Madrid. And finally, the Premier League. The Wheel Spurs ended the season in 10th place with 17 wins, 3 draws, 18 losses and 54 points. Although honestly, they could easily have finished as low as 13th on goal difference. Now, compare that to real-life Spurs, who at the time of recording are still fighting to avoid relegation, sitting just outside the drop zone by 2 points, with Chelsea and Everton still left to play. And even if they win both games, the highest they can possibly finish is 16th. And so, after an entire season of random tactics, random formations, random mentalities, and a wheel making every footballing decision possible, Spurs somehow ended up having a better season than real-life Spurs. Not a good season by any means, but somehow a better one. So, I now want to know what you think. Spurs fans, would you rather trust your actual managers or pure RNG? And if you enjoyed this one, please consider subscribing for more experiments in the future. Bye bye.